The partial block by York at the Oregon 41. Chuck with all kinds of time, and he throws it to Oregon. An interception, Khyree Jackson.
Pressure on third down. Penix off his back foot, overshoots, and it's intercepted. Khyree Jackson.
Going to take a shot downfield and nearly intercepted as he was looking for Weaver, but Khyree Jackson had excellent coverage.
Phenomenal job from the back end. Xavier Weaver is the deep threat.
Hey, everybody. He's Chris. He's Drew. I'm Ted. Ruby's around here somewhere. This is Vikings Report with Drew and Ted and Chris. And this is episode 134.
Man, it's like, you know, if you've ever been to like a TV studio or somewhere and they make you go in front of the green screen and you can try to figure out where the hell everything is because it's all backwards and whatever. You're just like, nope. Oh shit, all the weather's over here.
I don't really know what's going on. Oh man. You guys want one Jennifer or two Jennifers? This is what, this is having a technical meltdown.
You ever had to do the green screen thing?
I done it. I actually did it. We took a tour of the CNN Center one time. We were in Atlanta, and they had it set up there in the CNN building, like in the news area or whatever. But it takes a lot of getting used to. I mean, you'd go up there that first time, you're just like, you don't know where the hell anything is. But you can do it, but it takes a while.
Did you get to meet Wolf Blitzer or anything?
He was hiding under a desk somewhere, if I remember correctly. I did not see him, unfortunately.
Congress might act in the meantime to exercise our 2/3 authority to remove the disability from Donald Trump.
Look at Ted Glover. He's tanned, rested, and ready. He's like
I'm not tan. It's just poor lighting. One of my light bulbs is burned
he's
out.
all tan like Richard Nixon making a comeback.
I am not a crook.
How's it going, dudes? How's it going? We got a big show tonight. We got the
They're not going to
freeze band
have
here
Ted
tonight.
Glover to kick around anymore.
Just think how much you're going to be missing. You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore.
Oh, it's great to see you guys. I'm going to start the timer
Happy
here.
to be here.
Like Drew said, we got a big show. It's episode 134 for your viewing pleasure. We got a great surprise for you this evening. We got an interview with one Matt. It's Freeze, Not Fries. He's a writer over at Zone Coverage. He's a podcaster with a friend of the show, Nick Olson, with the Kindred Skulls podcast. I don't know if you guys remember, probably nobody does, but back when Drew and I were doing the Good Morning Gallahorn with our good buddy Dave Stefano, we did a draft show over the course of 3 days back in either 2018 or 2019. And I don't know if you remember, Drew, but like by round 5 on day 3, I was done. I was wasted. I'm never doing that again. but Freezer joined us on day 3, and by round 5 and 6, you were naming off guys. I don't even know if those people even existed. They were naming off players. They might have been fictitious names.
I still remember it, Ted. We were like,
Yeah.
Oh, this is unbelievable. How does he know about this guy from Holy Cross?
So the Miami Dolphins have selected Iguana Saint Mabel from our sister of Penelope Junior College.
Matt
Freezer.
Freeze knew.
Oh, yeah. This guy's got a 4.540. He was at the combine. And I'm like, how do you know this? This school, this person doesn't even exist. He was just tremendous. Anyways.
He was tremendous. We got him on the show tonight.
Yeah, he's going to talk about 4th-round pick Khyree Jackson for us, give you some in-depth breakdown on him. We got some Vikings news to talk about. Sorry we didn't have a show for you last week, but I had my my yearly sabbatical up in Canada, my fishing trip with my stepdad. My brother had a tremendous time, but I'm happy to be back.
Give me a fish count. What's the fish count and beer count? We always ask. Fish count, beer count.
Both were in the dozens. Just I had a tremendous time. Caught a muskie.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was awesome.
I've had a muskie. I've also been behind the green room.
Ever been behind the green door?
Yeah, that's where I got the muskie.
Did you have to take a shot for that?
Yeah.
More than one.
A series of shots per chance?
It's like the anthrax vaccine.
Before the FCC shuts us down, let me tell you about Purple Pain Forums and Daily Norseman. Purple Pain Forums is our home away from home on the internet. You can catch our show there. It's a great community of Vikings fans. It's not the garbage you'll find on social media. Great interaction, great off-season talk. You can talk about the Justin Jefferson extension. We talked about that on our live show we were on Monday. You can check that out on our live section on our YouTube page. We really won't talk about that tonight because we beat that to death on Monday when the extension was announced. But every offseason topic, who's going to start, Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy, all the stuff you ever want to know about the Minnesota Vikings without all the garbage of social media, that's Purple Pain Forums, purplepainforums.com. And then if you want to catch up on all the news about the Minnesota Vikings, head on over to the Daily Norseman. That's dailynorseman.com. That's a site my good friend Christopher Gates covers. See, I did that right the first time. Did you see that?
You did.
Yeah.
You're getting used to it.
Chris was gracious enough to let me write over there for many years. Still a great site. He's the founder, owner, and lead blogger of that site, the SB Nation site, Daily Norseman, dailynorseman.com. So head on over there and check it out. You guys ready to get this show on the road?
I'm ready to get this show on the road. No movie tonight. I miss our movies.
Yeah, we kind of cut that out with the Freeze Don't Call Me Fries interview coming out.
Well, we got draft picks to talk about, so we'll get through all that, and we'll be back to our movies maybe next week.
We will. So, Drew, what time is it?
Drew, Ted, Chris, I'm cooler than you are. So why don't you fix your little problem? Get Matt Freeze Fries in here and light this candle.
He's right. Give me some of the McDonald's fries and light this candle.
He surely is. The fry machine is working and the ice cream machine is not. Let's light this candle.
Yes. Resume the countdown.
All right, I'm cooler than you are. Why don't you fix your little problems and light this candle?
He's right. Let's light this candle.
He surely is. Light the candle.
Yes. Resume the countdown.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
All right. So the Vikings wrapped up their first mini camp this week, the mandatory one. It started out with the big news of the Justin Jefferson extension. Like I said just a couple minutes ago, we hit that pretty hot and heavy on Monday with our live show. But there was one thing that kind of came out a couple days later that we didn't mention. It was talked about by Albert Breer of the NFL Network. And this is what he said. Justin Jefferson's belief in Kevin O'Connell, Vikings head coach, mitigated any doubts that might have risen in letting former quarterback Kirk Cousins walk because of his ability to coach that position. Minnesota's quarterback situation really didn't change much in the context of the talks. I'm told Jefferson's belief in Kevin O'Connell mitigated any doubts that might have risen when Kirk Cousins left for the Atlanta Falcons. The two have a great bond, and Jefferson trusted Kevin O'Connell's judgment and ability to coach that particular position implicitly. Do you guys remember when, I don't know how many people were saying, well, if the Vikings let Kirk Cousins walk, Justin Jefferson isn't going to stay. One more thing completely blown out of the water about that whole JJ contract situation this entire offseason. So put that in your pipe and smoke it too.
I mean, if some of these dudes had any credibility left, they would have completely burned it on the Justin Jefferson situation. But I mean, there's a fine line between, reporting and making stuff up. And that line got obliterated by a lot of these folks over the past few months, because I don't know if it's the media's desire to have Justin Jefferson on one of the teams that they actually care about rather than Minnesota. But, I don't know what it is. Like they can't handle the fact that a guy of Justin Jefferson's caliber plays for the Minnesota Vikings. And that's too bad because he's here until 2028 now because of the contract extensions.
And I don't know if it's the Minnesota Vikings, but it's not that he's on one of the coasts. He's not on the West Coast. He's not on one of the New York teams or in the NFC East. So, suck it, Florio. Whatever.
Yeah, smartest thing I did is 3 or 4 years ago, cutting my listening people down to just bare minimum. I don't do NFL Network or ESPN and just garbage. I don't have any use for it anymore, Ted. You know what? I get my information from the guys on podcasts. That's where I get it's taking over because these talking heads on TV don't know what the hell they're talking about.
They honestly don't. Like Chris alluded to, I think a lot of these guys, I don't know if they flat out make stuff up, but they infer a lot of things based on what isn't said and run with it for clicks.
Justin Jefferson was never going to get traded. He's always going to be here. And he's fired up on McCarthy because he watched McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy is a guy that Jefferson knows is going to scramble out of there. Guy hanging off his shoulder pads. He's going to throw it up there anyway. It's going to work out very well together. And so he's probably excited.
I'm very much a change is bad guy. Always have been. But not all change is actually bad. And I think Justin Jefferson is smart enough to realize that this, in the long run, is probably a good thing for the Vikings. Because, I mean, Kirk wasn't going to be with this team much longer anyways.
No.
And change was inevitable at the quarterback position, so you might as well do it now rather than later. Letting Kirk walk allowed the Vikings to add all those players on defense, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman, allowed for the Justin Jefferson extension, allowed them to sign Aaron Jones. Moves that not all of those things would have been able to happen had they re-signed Kirk, had they gone after Daniil Hunter and quote-unquote ran it back again.
Guys, how can a Viking fan not be excited about the changes the Vikings have made going forward?
They're out there, man. Believe it or not, they're out there. I don't know. I don't have any use for them anymore.
No.
Yeah, I don't either. But other than that, it's been a mostly quiet minicamp. Other than the big news, like the first day, and it was just kind of sort of throwaway line. Kevin O'Connell was having a presser, and he's like, "Yay, we're trying N'Keal Harry out at tight end." And like, what? What did he just say? N'Keal Harry, wide receiver N'Keal Harry, former first-round pick N'Keal Harry.
Just before we started recording here, a couple folks came on the Twitter or the X machine or whatever it is we're calling it now. They said that according to the Vikings roster page, which I don't think has been updated since last season, N'Keal Harry was listed at 6'4", 225. Apparently he showed up to OTAs at about 240. So he's adding some bulk. TJ Hawkinson's about 250. So he's adding some bulk. He's adding some size. I mean, I can't recall off the top of my head if his blocking has been an issue. I mean, obviously, I don't think they expect to be like an inline blocker right away or anything. But, you know, the guy obviously has some receiving skills. He was a first-round pick for a reason. He hasn't caught a pass for the Vikings yet. He's been mostly on special teams. But, you know, with the tight end situation kind of what it is right now, because with Hawkinson's status still kind of uncertain, you've got Josh Oliver, you got Johnny Munt, you got Nick Muse. Trey Knox came in as an undrafted free agent, but that position's kind of up in the air right now, and the Vikings tend to use a lot of tight ends, so they apparently want to give it a go, and you know, if it works out, it's a bonus, and if it's not, I guess no harm done, really.
For what it's worth, at the end of the season, I was about 218, and I showed up for tonight's show about 245. So
yeah, me too.
You know, I can bulk up too. Drew, what do you think about Mr. Harry being moved to tight end?
Usually I was more impressed with Deborah Harry when it came to watching film. This guy, listen, I keep a list of wide receivers only and then list of guys that you watch in college that are unbelievable, and then they get to the pros and do this. Treadwell. Yes, Braylon Edwards is on there. I got a long list because it's a mystery to me, guys. You watch Harry's tape at Arizona State. That guy is an unbelievable wide receiver. Unbelievable. But apparently it hasn't worked from New England all the way up to this. Somebody sat him down and went, dude, you need to make a change. And I laughed about this at first, guys, and I started thinking, this could be a great, great storyline. Because somebody sat him down and says, you do this crappy, you do this crappy, and you do this crappy. You might as well be a tight end because the things you do good will exploit that position and make you good at it. So I'm all intrigued to find out. I don't think this is just a punchline or a joke. I want to see what the guy can do because he didn't do it as a wide receiver. And I don't know, but every once in a while you get a guy that was so good in college. I mean, I had him as number like 5 on my Drew Big Board that year coming out of college. He's electric. And he just never figured it out at the pros. Let him switch over because it wasn't going to work at receiver. Why not try this?
Yeah, I don't think he had a spot on the roster as a receiver. I mean, you know, the first 2 spots, are locked up. I think Brandon Powell probably has the inside track for wide receiver 3 right now. And like you mentioned, with the tight end position kind of in flux right now, and we've talked about this in past shows, I'm not sold on Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt. There was a noticeable drop-off when TJ Hawkinson went out late last year with his injury. And you look at a guy with the pass-catching skill that a former first-round wide receiver pick has, and it's on par with TJ Hawkinson. I mean, look, the Vikings didn't give up a second and a third-round pick to get TJ Hawkinson for him to be Jim Kleinsaucer. I mean, they didn't. They got him to be a guy to catch passes over the middle and exploit mismatches between linebackers and safeties. You look at N'Keal Harry and his size and what he can do. I'm not saying he's going to be the starting tight end week 1, but when you look at the Vikings quarterback situation right now, whether it's Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, giving either of those guys another weapon akin to TJ Hawkinson over the middle, I don't think this is a joke. I think this is a very serious thing, and they're going to play this out as long as it can go to see if he can actually do this. And if he can, because look, you got Munt and you got Oliver. I mean, they signed Oliver. He was one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. That's one of the reasons they signed him, right?
Yes.
Munt's a blocking tight end. So why not see if they can't convert Harry into a Hawkinson-like pass-catching tight end?
You always have the option of having that hybrid guy that has the wide receiver experience. So if he starts to thrive at tight end, you could jet him outside during plays. You could sub-package him. You can move him all over the place. He could become a versatile guy. Now, listen, is he gonna turn into somebody like the great Jimmy Giles or Stu Voigt? I mean, we don't know, but if you look at his college tape, he knows about routes and all that kind of stuff. So I think it just gives you a weird curveball in your lineup. Why not? I mean, try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. What does it hurt?
Yeah, that's just it. It's no harm, no foul at this point right now.
Right.
One other quick note. I meant to put this in notes. The Vikings re-signed Dalton Reisner. We talked about that on the show on Monday. But it looks like with the contract terms announced, it looks like Blake Brandel is still got the guy that the Vikings are looking at to be the starting left guard, and Reisner's it looks like they signed him to be the backup, which is kind of a surprising move for me.
And I mean, you look at the two contracts. I mean, Reisner's contract terms finally came out earlier this week. He got a 1-year deal, not much guaranteed, about 1.5 million guaranteed, total deal about 2.5. The deal Brandel signed earlier this season was 3 years, a little more than 9 million, about 5 million guaranteed. So, if you're looking at it from a contract perspective, Brandel's contract is more in line with the guy you expect to start than Risner's is. And, before the Risner signing, Wes Phillips was out there at a press conference going, we believe in Blake Brandel. We think he's earned the opportunity to take this spot, and we're going to give him every opportunity to do so. So I don't know if there's going to be an honest-to-God competition in camp or if they have Brandel penciled in as the starter, but whichever one of those two guys loses that battle becomes your top backup, because I think Brandel can back up pretty much every position but center. And Drew, you can probably correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe Risner did work out at center for teams during his pre-draft process, so he could feasibly back up all three of the interior spots as well. So
yeah, exactly. He did. I don't think Dalton Reisner's not a left side guy. He's a right guard. He was a right tackle at Kansas State, played some right guard at right side. And you say, well, right side and left side, what's the difference? It's a big difference when you're playing football. People talk about how he's a terrible run blocker. Look at his PFF, run blocking grade. Well, that's because he's a right guard. I don't have a problem. They want to fight out for position. That's fine. But Reisner was dominant in college on the right side of the offensive line. He was a much better run blocker. But I always say it, we got a big pool to choose from now. So why not? I'd rather have some backup. What did we have at one time? We had nothing. We had no depth.
Yeah,
and at least they have depth now. Yeah. So one last bit of news, and this is not Vikings related. We found out earlier this week that NFL Hall of Famer and one of the key pieces out of those great 1990s Dallas dynasty that was built on the back of the Herschel Walker trade, Hall of Famer Larry Allen passed away suddenly. Larry Allen, he was one of the most dominant offensive linemen in NFL history. I saw all-time greatest 100 clips NFL Network does. They had John Randall talking about Larry Allen. And I think one of the first things John Randall said,
692 pounds. When a man can bench press 692 pounds, that man can launch you.
And John Randall said, one of the greatest trash talkers of all time, John Randall. You didn't trash talk Larry Allen. You were very polite to Larry Allen. If he got knocked on the ground, you helped him up. You said, "Hi, Mr. Allen." You tried to get him to smile. You didn't want to make Larry Allen mad, because I saw him throw guys 20 yards, linebackers 20 yards, and the linebacker would come back and say, "What do I do?" And you just look at him and you say, "You do your best."
And there was another clip that was going around social media after word came out of his passing. I think the Cowboys were playing the Saints or something like that, and there was a Saints guy that got an interception, and it looked like he was taking it back for a pick six. And all of a sudden, here comes 300 and however many pounds it is of Larry Allen coming into he chases this defensive back down. He was closing the gap. It's not like this DB was slowing down or anything. He caught up with that dude and dragged him down at whatever size he was. But yeah, I thought it was great that Randall, who you said was one of the great trash talkers of all time, basically said, "Yeah, you didn't trash talk Larry Allen because you just didn't, because that dude was going to crush you at pretty much every turn." So yeah.
What about the shot in the arm he gave scouts everywhere when they drafted him, and everybody's going, "Where the hell is Sonoma State?" I mean, nobody knew Sonoma State, but it was right in my backyard in it's actually in Rohnert Park, which is connected to Santa Rosa, where I lived for many, many years. Sonoma State, 5-minute drive over there to watch their games. But I mean, that's some good scouting.
Did you see him play in college? Did you ever go to any Sonoma State games?
No, I did not go to any Cossack games. Sonoma State.
The Sonoma State Cossacks, really?
Yeah,
wow.
They were terrible, more like the Coxsacks, but they.
What?
Sad day, Ted.
Yeah, it is. One of those things, whether it's a guy that played for the Vikings or the Cowboys, you just hate to see it. The guys from our youth, the Bud Grants and guys like that from are passing away at a pretty fast rate. And now you see guys from the 90s starting to go. You see the video highlights. Larry Allen and the late, great Reggie White. I saw a couple clips of those two guys going at it, and that was just manhood on manhood, man. I oh, geez.
Allen didn't lose many battles, hardly ever.
And there was also a clip of John Madden, and it just reminds me of how great football coverage used to be. John Madden went on for like 2 or 3 minutes straight on Larry Allen, just the technical aspects of being an offensive lineman and blocking, and you just don't see that kind of description and coverage. And
you got the sweat and the snot.
Yeah. So anyways, thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Larry Allen. I'm not a Cowboys fan by any stretch of the imagination, but he was and is an all-time great NFL player, a Hall of Famer, multiple Super Bowl champion, and it's just sad to see.
So apparently the teams from Sonoma State now are called the Seawolves. According to the Wikipedia entry here, it says, from the school's opening in 1962 until 2002, the school's teams were known as the Cossacks, a nod to the Russian settlers at Fort Ross. The Cossacks name was deemed offensive because of the group's, quote, fanatical intolerance of non-Christians. In November 2002, Sonoma State's Academic Senate voted 24-3 in favor of renaming the mascot, this team without a reference to any human group. So yes, they are now officially known as the Sonoma State Seawolves, not the Sonoma State Cossacks.
Just like Ho Chi Minh City will always be Saigon, Sonoma State will always be the Cossacks. So
they will always be the Cossacks.
And be that as it may, that's all we got for news right now. Coming up, we've got our interview with Matt. Don't call him Fries, Freeze. Matt, get in here. All right, folks, like we said at the beginning of the show, joining us now is Matt, Mr. Freeze. He's a writer for Zone Coverage, co-host with friend of the show on Kindred SKOLs, friend of the show, Nick Olson, the Kindred SKOLs podcast. And he was Batman's arch nemesis in Batman and Robin. He is one Mr. Matt Freeze. Matt, how are you, my friend? Good to see you again.
Yeah, Ted, I apologize. I don't know if I have the Arnold voice for you to kind of match that Mr. Freeze energy there.
We only have one true voice imitator on the show, and it's one Mr. Christopher Gates. So,
yes.
Yeah, but the Arnold thing is a little rusty. I don't know if I can't remember anything he said from Batman and Robin, to be honest. It was not a great movie, but
It was a bunch of cold puns, I believe.
yes.
Like in Running Man. Remember that Running Man yet? There was a freeze guy in there, wasn't there? Some kind of
Might have
Oh,
been.
there was. Yeah, there was. Yeah.
Loved Running Man.
Good. That was a good Total Recall, Drew. No, see what
Whoa!
All right.
Meow, meow. The freezer is here tonight.
Anyways, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. We were talking before you came on. The last time we saw you, we were doing on our old Good Morning Gallahorn show. We did actually a 3-day draft show, and Matt joined us on day 3, and he was pulling knowledge on guys in the 5th and 6th round from dudes that were bagging groceries like, a month and a half later. Matt's just an incredible football mind, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to have him on here tonight, because we are talking 4th round draft pick, cornerback Khyree Jackson, pick 108 overall out of the University of Oregon. Matt, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't do a whole lot of draft research because everybody assumed coming into this draft the Vikings were going to cough up 3 first-round draft picks for a quarterback and weren't going to do much else this draft weekend. And, so look, what do you think of Khyree Jackson? Is he going to be a good player? Is he going to be an eventual starter? What is your overall impression of this kid out of Oregon?
Yeah, so I got to be honest with you. The only guy by the time the Vikings drafted him that I'd really heard of or known anything about, after obviously Dallas Turner and J.J. McCarthy, was Will Reichard, and that's just because I recognize his name as the kicker from Alabama, right? Like, I really didn't know much about any of these guys, so it's been a fun diving in after the fact on them. And I really haven't gotten through anybody but Khyree from the day 3 guys. And Kyrie's really interesting to me, right? Because he's got, and I think we all know it by now, but the phenomenal backstory of where he was out of football for a little while, bounced around, didn't academically qualify initially. So he went to JUCO, had a bad JUCO situation initially. Like a lot of those programs aren't great, right? They don't have great amenities facilities, had a little bit of, homesickness there. So he ends up getting back into the JUCO process after being out of it for a year or 2, I think, eventually goes to Alabama and then finally transfers over to Oregon, right, as kind of a high JUCO recruit. And what it has made him as a prospect is somebody who has incredible physical tools, right? He's a massive player for a corner at 6'3". He's not all that heavy, but he's got long arms as well, almost 33-inch arms, which is rare for corners to have that kind of length there. So he's got great physical tools. I think he's got great movement skills, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But he's a very raw player despite being an older player, right? Just because he doesn't have the background of that experience at major college football level at all, because not only was he a JUCO prospect, but he was a JUCO prospect during the COVID year when a lot of JUCO teams weren't playing, right? So he didn't have a lot of experience at the junior level. He spent 2 years at Alabama, but didn't get a lot of snaps in either season, right? And then finally starts like the entire year for Oregon. So it's really kind of an interesting situation with him from a background perspective, right? And I was able to watch 3 games. So I got the Washington game, the USC game, and the Colorado game. All 3 high-powered offenses, right, with high-level quarterbacks, or at least 2 people considered to be high-level quarterbacks. So it's a pretty good game. It's a pretty good games to watch him in, right, because they're throwing the ball all over the field, and you get like sufficient level passing, right? Like obviously Caleb Williams isn't going to have a problem throwing a 40-yard bomb over the top, right? So you have to guard against that as a corner. And I think, I mentioned his movement skills earlier. Those are what really stand out to me on tape. You have a guy who's that big, but I think he moves really, really smoothly. You see him covering routes that break inside in man coverage, which were some of the hardest routes for corners to cover. He can stick with the defender hip to hip, and also keep with secondary breaks, which is really difficult and something you only see smaller guys doing. Like that's a very strong skill I think Byron Murphy has specifically on the Vikings. But there are flashes, and it's certainly not a finished product. And I'm going to get into some of the deficiencies I think I see. But there are flashes of what I saw Sauce Gardner do at Cincinnati at the high end level plays, right?
Wow.
You have to
Sauce Gardner comparison out in the first 5 minutes of this interview.
But you have to take that back a step because he's not consistent at all, right? You see the high level flashes and like the physicality and the like physical frame of a Sauce Gardner with good speed. He didn't run a great 40, but I think he ran, I think it was a 4.5 flat, which is still honestly a good time for a tall, long limbed guy that he is. Like, I don't think he's going to get absolutely roasted deep. The one thing that concerns me, though, is he gets beat off of the line of scrimmage very regularly as a defender. And that's something that's very different for what Sauce Gardner is. His press technique is not there at all. Receivers are very easily able to force him to take false steps, and that allows them to stack him and get behind him, as a defender, right? So he got beat over the top multiple times against Colorado, and I just thought Shedeur Sanders wasn't able to execute the throw. Like, I thought there was a wide open receiver on a go ball, and the throw was just not there in the situation on a couple reps against Colorado, right? So that's happening semi-consistently at the college level. It definitely happened against Washington, where he was late. He allowed a touchdown in that game. That might have been the only touchdown he allowed per PFF on the season, actually, if I'm going back and thinking about it. And don't quote me on that. But, ultimately there's inconsistency there, right? So it's the consistency that we really need to iron out and get better, right? Because I think we've seen high-level flashes from a lot of the guys who are in the Vikings cornerback room right now, right? And the consistency isn't there. Caleb Evans springs to mind as somebody who really fell off towards the end of last season. And I think he ended up getting a couple bad plays and it got into his head and it really kind of snowballed from there, right? But he's shown high-level flashes and the ability to do that. Khyree Jackson has shown the high-level flashes and the ability to do that too. It's putting it together on a consistent down-to-down every snap basis that we really need to see, right? So like the ceiling to me is astronomical, but the floor to me is also very low, right? So it kind of makes sense as a fourth-round prospect that you'd have that boom-bust potential. And I think I'd rather go for that and hope that the coaching staff with Durante Jones, right, our defensive back coach, with Brian Flores, who's had great success with long corners. Like, you look at what he put together in Miami, you look at the production, the corner producing machine that the New England Patriots were under the Bill Belichick, which included Brian Flores there, right? I think it makes sense to bet on those guys, but I'm not counting my chickens before they hatch with this one, right?
So was his draft stock hurt because of the inconsistency or his inexperience or his relative, I don't want to say old age, because I mean, the dude's only 24, but that's kind of old for a draft prospect.
Yeah.
Or kind of a combination of all three.
I think age absolutely matters when you're looking at prospects. I think as you get later in the draft, right, just your chances of hitting on a guy diminish to very little. So age starts to matter less once you get on to day 3. But the reality is, if you're a 24-year-old playing against 18, 19, 20-year-olds, you're more physically developed than those guys are, right? So you're going to have a natural advantage, even if your technique's not all the way there. So your natural physical advantage, your athletic advantage, can paper over some of the technique deficiencies, I think. I think the weird path creates questions, right? It doesn't sound like it was the most amicable situation when he transferred out of Alabama, right? Obviously, Alabama is an extremely competitive program. They have a specific style for what they need. And I think almost, Nick Saban, very tied in with the Bill Belichick tree. I would imagine Brian Flores has pretty strong ties to, the Saban tree in general, and, might have some more inside information on that. But really, I think what it comes down to is a combination of the age, the inexperience, and the inconsistency, right? It's really all three that causes him to fall, because with his high ceiling is the reason he got drafted as high as he did, right? I think those factors, if he didn't have that high ceiling, he would have kind of been out of the draft situation entirely.
So I got one more question. I'll turn over to Drew and Chris. So one of the things that Brian Flores is, that just jumped out at me last year with his defense is position flexibility. And we've talked about it a lot on this show with different guys, especially Josh Metellus. What I have read about Khyree Jackson is that he seems like a prototype guy for a Brian Flores defense. Do you see him as a guy that could be moved around a lot in the secondary in this defense, or do you see him more of as a strictly an outside guy or strictly as a slot guy? How do you see Brian Flores using him?
Yeah, so I think he's pretty strictly an outside corner, but I think that's okay in this Vikings defense. I think we have the versatile pieces that we need, And an outside corner, somebody who can play man coverage on the outside, is something we're severely lacking, right? I mean, there's been a ton of conversation about how, the Vikings zone coverages were getting shredded. And it was a really unique, really innovative thing that we were doing last year. But we also need to continue to evolve in the NFL because teams figure out your innovation eventually, right? You need to continually innovate to be a good defensive coach or an offensive coach in the NFL, frankly. So Brian Flores historically has run a lot more man coverage. I think that's why people are talking of Khyree Jackson as a fit, because I see him as a man corner. I see him as an outside man / cover 3 kind of press bail or press corner who's mostly dealing with outside routes, but can handle the inbreakers as well. And that's where the man part comes in, because you have to work well on the inbreakers. I think man is a solution to a lot of the problems the Vikings had over the middle of the field last year. I also think that Byron Murphy and Josh Metellus, Byron Murphy played like a quote unquote safety position in our inverted 2 high coverages, right? He was a high safety when Cam Bynum or Harrison Smith or Josh Metellus were coming down into the box, right? Kind of in a lot of our coverage structures last year. He was an incredibly versatile piece. And I think we want him to free him up to do more things, because he's also by far our best outside corner, right? So it's kind of hard for him to both be a versatile chess piece that can be moved around, and the rest of the help that we had in the secondary last year really wasn't up to par from a starting NFL caliber perspective. So I think we're trying to take more shots on physical outside guys to free Byron Murphy up to do more, is kind of my experience. And that's why you see the Shaq Griffin signing and the Khyree Jackson draft pick.
Okay. Drew, Chris, fire away.
Yeah, so whenever people talk about Khyree Jackson, the first thing that seems to come out is the obvious observation about his size. He's a 6'3", 6'4" guy, but you've talked about his movement skills, and generally when you get a defensive back this size, one of the first instincts is you want to try to move him to safety right away. What is it about his motion skills, his movement skills, and whatever that makes you think he can stick as a legitimate cornerback in the NFL rather than potentially having to be shifted just because he is a bigger, taller guy?
Yeah, so I think it's in the hips mostly, right? Like, he's got great, from what I can see, stop ability and ability to turn with receivers. And he tends to guide receivers with his hands, right? So I should have gone back to this. He's a little bit handsy. You're allowed to do that in a college game, right? He's going to need to get more skilled at playing a little bit further off players, or maybe not quite as physical with players. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting, because there were a couple instances where he really got out of whack and slipped up and wasn't able to follow guys. But I think generally, like, he kept up with whip routes, which are, a sharp cut inside by the receiver and then a turnaround back out that's pretty sharp. It's really hard to keep up. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If you were to try to follow somebody who is running that and they know what they're doing and you don't know what they're doing, it's really hard to keep up with somebody who's doing that, right? So he showed that ability on tape, and I think the lower body flexibility is what enables you to do that. So I think he's just naturally very good at it, which is why I think he's fine to stay at corner. A lot of guys who have to move to safety don't necessarily have that short area quickness. And I'm not saying he's as good as like a smaller slot corner in terms of the short area quickness, but I think he's more than good enough to be a starting outside corner.
Okay. Drew, what do you got?
National championship, first off.
Oh, my God.
That in my bag.
Oh, God, here we go. Matt, I don't know if you know, Drew is a huge Michigan fan. I'm a huge Ohio State fan.
Sorry, I couldn't tell by the shirt in his background.
Yeah.
Who he supported.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing I had him at number 13 on my corner board, but with corners, there's so many good corners. That's really a high ranking for a corner board. I had him going late third, early fourth, which is right where he went. I think, what I see with this guy, Matt, is it's just being coached up. I think the problems that he has is being like over aggressive. He could do a little better at route recognition, see where he's going with that. I think he gets himself in trouble by being over aggressive, which isn't bad, because if you could temper that, keep the aggression, but focus him on the technique more, I think he's got unbelievable potential. What I saw on tape, the only time he gets in trouble is he gets grabbing the jersey down the field.
Yep.
He's got to work on that, but I think I'm not worried about the speed, the 4.5. I don't think you ever make this guy a safety. I think he's an outside corner 100%, but I think you can do a lot of stuff with him. He's not scared to tackle. Do you think at 6'4", I know he's going to be a red zone target, but what do you think his position will be this year? How much playing time do you see him getting? Is it going to be a big learning curve? What do you think?
It's a really interesting question to me because if I had to bet, I don't think Khyree is a starter to start the season at the very least. The Vikings have a lot of guys who they've invested kind of that mid-round capital in, right? Like Khyree Jackson, and Kyree's the most recent, but I think they took Mekhi Blackman in a very similar spot. Technically he's a third-round pick, but it was like one of the last picks of the third round. Khyree was one of the first picks of the fourth round, right? Like they were within, I think, 10 overall picks in the draft. What wasn't Blackman like 99 or 100 or something?
I'll look it up here while we're talking.
And Khyree was 108, right?
And then Caleb Evans, I think, was in Adolfo Mensa's first draft, and he heaped praise on him after his first draft, I believe.
Yeah, and Evans was there, showed some good play last year, obviously completely kind of cratered towards the end of the season. Not what you want to see, but you would be hopeful that he can bounce back a little bit. Shaq Griffin, I think, adds good competition. He's got a little bit of question marks with like what his history is, right? Because I don't really understand why he's bounced around to teams from, I watched a couple of games of his with the Texans, and I thought, like, he played pretty well. I didn't think he was playing to a level where you would expect him to then get cut by the Texans late in the season, right? So, or to a point where they would want to move on from him, right? Or think a split is the best decision for them, right? So it's kind of an interesting scenario with all the bodies in there. I think if I had to bet right now, it would be Shaq Griffin and Byron Murphy as a starting outside corner, but I could see literally any of Mekhi Blackman, Khyree Jackson, Caleb Evans, or Andrew Booth Jr. honestly get in there. I think Andrew Booth is probably the lowest of them, but he still might be my favorite player. And that's a little bit of, I'm probably still sticking to my old takes. I really liked him coming out of school, but all of those guys are guys Kwesi drafted, right? So it's not like any of them are still holdovers from the old regime that the front office doesn't have an investment in. I think the Flores guys maybe have a little bit of a leg up, so that would give Jackson or Blackman a leg up. But I do think the inexperience from Jackson probably puts him below some of the guys who have been in the system for a year or two. But it wouldn't surprise me if he's the starter. I just don't necessarily expect him to, because I think some of the flaws he has in his game might take a little bit longer to work out than that.
Played his senior year when they won the state championship there at Henry Wise High School up in Maryland, where Ted's familiar with. We partied a lot up in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Remember those days, Ted?
Yeah, up and down the I-95 corridor, you and I, boy. Ooh.
Played for the great DeLon Parrish. He played up. He did. Check it out. He played for DeLon Parrish. He caught 12 touchdowns his senior year. I like guys who go from wide receiver to corner, make that transition. I do. Yeah. I just think that you get to learn both sides of it really well. But his coach told him, dude, next level, you're going to want to go to corner. You're not going to pan out at wide receiver. So he's now the tallest corner in the NFL now, right? Him and Tariq Woolen, they're both 6'4".
I think he might be. I think he and Woolen are pretty much the same height. I could pull it up, but actually, something you bring up there, the ball skills. He's also got great ball skills. Like I don't have a question on his ability to find the ball in the air and make contact with it and knock it down. And that's something that we obviously saw lacking from the Vikings secondary last year, right? How many, like the Cortland Sutton touchdown for the Broncos to win that game, the T. Higgins touchdown, right? Like those two touchdowns in the Saints game, just like some absolutely brutal contested catch losses for the Vikings.
What was the Chargers game? Who caught that touchdown at the end of the Chargers game?
Oh, Hunter Henry? Or no, I'm sorry, the tight end, right?
Yeah, I think so. Was it Evans that had the pick, and but you guys know what I'm talking about late in that game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It got tipped up in the air and caught by Josh Palmer.
There you go.
That's what it was. Yep.
You had mentioned the guys that had been drafted about the same range, other than Andrew Booth Jr. We talked Caleb Evans, Mekhi Blackman. I don't think he's in any danger. But let's talk Andrew Booth Jr., Caleb Evans. Now we've got Khyree Jackson. One, I hate Twitter. I like you on Twitter. I like your co-host Nick. I like Luke Braun on Twitter. Most of Twitter sucks, but there's a few good eggs. But there has been speculation that the Khyree Jackson signing may spell doom for one of either Booth, Evans, because, we talked about Evans just kind of really slumping badly into the year. Booth has just never seemed to figure it out. Do you agree with that, or do you think both those guys are safe on the 2024 roster?
Yeah, so I guess the way you would have to game it out, right, is you take 11 players, I think, in the defensive back room. And I don't know if you can include Najee Thompson or not in that, right? Obviously, as a core special teamer, I think he's just going to make the roster, period, but he's not really going to be a factor on defense.
Right.
So in the safety room, we kept Lewis Cine on the roster all year last year. I'm more out on Cine than I am on Booth. Like, I think Booth has the possibility to become a rotational NFL player or maybe even a starter at some point. I just based on Cine's track record, it unfortunately, because I really liked him coming out of the draft as well, I don't see it being there. So we could keep one less safety on the roster than we did last year, right? Obviously, Theo Jackson, I think, is going to stay. You have the three starters, basically. They're all Metellus, Harrison Smith, and Cam Bynum are all starters, really. And then I honestly couldn't even name you a guy offhand after that. So Jay Ward, I think, right?
If you need the guy to jump off sides on field goals, that's your dude. Yeah.
So if you keep those five, right, that leaves you 6 corners that are available to keep, right?
Okay.
So Byron Murphy's a lock to me. Shaq Griffin, I would put as a probable. Khyree, just because he's a 4th round draft pick, I think is a lock territory, right? You want to at least see what you have for a year.
Sure.
And then you end up, so that's 3 guys. You end up with the other 3 guys being Booth, Evans, and Blackman, right? And there are a couple depth guys beyond that. I know Jalen Williams got a couple plays at the end of last year or something like that as a slot corner option. But I think you have room for all of those guys, assuming you don't keep Lewis Cine in the safety room, right? For those 11 guys. Now, somebody could easily usurp one of those, and I'd say just because they're the furthest out, Evans or Booth would be the one who gets usurped. I would say Booth is probably the most likely one just because of what his status on the depth chart was last year, right? Like, both Blackman and Evans got snaps over him for the majority of the season. Now, I think Booth maybe climbed up the depth chart a little bit by the end of the season, but you may go back and just kind of call that a wash for Caleb Evans because it kind of spiraled on him a little bit, right? So, I could very easily see one of Evans or Booth off the roster, but I would project him to make it right now if I were making a 53.
Okay. And let's be honest, Jalen Williams did get some snaps at the end of the season, Mr. Matt Freeze. But hell, I could have got a couple snaps at corner last year at the end of the season.
It's like the 2021 Vikings secondary. Who did we have a Chris Jones who wasn't the Kansas City guy in that secondary?
There was a Chris Jones on the roster. He was not good, which is why he wasn't on the roster in 2022.
I mean, that was bad at the end of the season. Bad.
That's okay. We'll always have Duke Shelley. So
yeah,
Duke Shelley.
That guy's not even on a roster right now, I don't think. Vikings Twitter was in mourning for like 48 hours last year when he went to the
How
the
could
Raiders.
it not
was
be?
that. Well, no, I mean I get it, but I mean, geez.
He saved the Buffalo game, man.
Josh Allen saved the Buffalo game by not holding on to the damn football at the goal line.
Well,
but that's here nor there. I get what you're saying.
All right, Chris or Drew, back to you guys. What else you got for Mr. Freeze?
Mr. Freeze. I'm not really worried about people out. There's a lot of talk about, well, he didn't work out at Bama. There's a lot of politics involved to that Bama thing. I mean, he only had 83 snaps in 2 seasons, but look at the Bama corner room in 2022. Kool-Aid, what was it? Branch was there, Battle, Ricks, Moore, Terrion Arnold. I mean, there's a lot of good players there. So you made a good move on going to Oregon. Didn't have any of the dude, he couldn't cut it there. Matter of fact, if you asked Saban, he probably would have told you that Jackson was the best corner he had when he came into school there. So got suspended, had to leave, and people want to break that down as to being something going on with that, Ted. I don't.
Wasn't it Jackson that said when he got drafted, I watched all the calls, they make to the draft picks. Wasn't it him that said you just drafted the best corner?
Yeah.
The best corner in the league.
Oh, yeah. Was Jackson right?
Yep.
He won the Vikings over at the Senior Bowl, didn't he, Matt?
Yeah, so I actually think Durante Jones was the defensive backs coach on whatever, it's North versus South on whatever team Jackson was on. at the Senior Bowl. So he was coaching him hands-on there. And that's really what won him over, I think, from the story. Alec Lewis from The Athletic had a great story on him. And I know multiple came out right after the draft. So there's probably 3 or 4 guys who put out good work on just Khyree Jackson's backstory. But, that confidence, I think, it's a prerequisite for being a really good corner in the NFL. I think you kind of have to be a little unhinged to play corner, right? Because I mentioned earlier, the other guy knows what he's supposed to do, right? He's got his route drawn on the paper. You got to figure out what he's trying to do and match him and stop him from getting the football. So you kind of have to have a couple screws loose to be able to do that, I think.
You got to have a little bit like Rivas, Woodson. They all had a little bit of attitude about them. I think it's a great pick for the Vikings, and I think it's going to work out really well.
Yeah, so it's a little weird. College is a little bit more basic in the NFL in terms of what you see as a cornerback too, right? So they're not running the complex route concepts that you have in the NFL. There's a transition for that. And I think if I had to guess, that's what Andrew Booth has really struggled with in his time, to me, where he has the physical skills to do it. But he, especially in 2022, I think he played okay, actually, when he was in last year. But he was just guessing wrong all the time on route concepts, right? And his head wasn't in the right place in terms of where he needed to be to match his responsibility on defense. So, that's the big transition. And that requires both a lot of work from the coaching staff to be able to get the player ready to do that, and then work from the player outside of that to be able to do that, right? So there's a lot that we can't see that goes on, for the player to be able to learn and kind of have that level of success. So at the end of the day, right, a 4th round pick, we're not necessarily going to assume is going to be a future starter. But what I really like about Jackson is his potential to become a future starter.
So the learning curve with him is probably more processing than it is athletic ability.
Absolutely. I think he's got the athleticism to do it, right? It's the processing and putting the technique with the processing, because, and this maybe goes into quarterbacks a little bit more, but like fixing quarterback footwork is really difficult because when they're in the fire, you tend to revert to what you're used to doing, right? That's the same for any position in the NFL, right? When you're lined up and you're one-on-one, you tend to revert to what you're used to doing. So you have to work and drill really hard to get rid of the tendencies that you used to have, right? It's hard to break a habit.
I know. I'm trying to break habits on this show every week, and I seem to not be able to do them.
And Drew, I don't mean to correct your college football knowledge and prowess, but Oregon is a legendary Big Ten school. They are not in the Pac-12.
Yeah, just like USC. Wait,
yeah, that's going to be a hell of a conference next year, isn't it?
Wait for that first big USC Rutgers matchup in Piscataway.
Legendary Big Ten powerhouses, USC and Rutgers from Piscataway, New Jersey.
When all the smoke clears, it'll be Michigan, Ohio State fighting it out next year too.
Yeah. All right, Matt, I've got one more question, then I'll give it to Drew and Chris to finish up. Is there anything that you see that could prevent Jackson from making the active roster this year and maybe going to the practice squad?
Nothing really on the field, if I'm being honest with you. Okay. I think when you draft a guy that high, it's extremely, extremely rare for them to not make your active roster when you come in. So he would have to be, absolutely disastrous in practice, right? And because he's a project guy, I think they'll even excuse that, right? It would be hard for me to see a situation where, based on his on-the-field play, he doesn't make the roster, right? There's always the potential for any sort of thing to happen, but yeah.
Who starts first, J.J. McCarthy or Khyree Jackson?
First start, I think that's an interesting question. And I think more so they're going to take JJ slow than anything. Like, I might be willing to start JJ week 1, depending on how he takes to some of the things in the NFL game. But
smart football mind right there. JJ McCarthy starts week 1.
I would say McCarthy starts before Jackson, but
all right,
it could be a toss-up.
All right. Drew, Chris, what else you got for Mr. Freeze?
Speaking of JJ McCarthy, before I get to my last Khyree Jackson question, I want to point out that over at Zone Coverage, Matt earlier today when we're recording this, put together a story where he charted out all 400 plus snaps that J.J. McCarthy took last season for Michigan. If you are a Viking fan, you owe it to yourself to make sure you read that at some point. But Yeah, we talk about guys like Khyree Jackson who are fourth round picks or whatever, and he's going to be far enough down the depth chart. I don't know if it's something we can glean from his college game or not, but does he bring any potential value on special teams? I mean, he's probably not a return guy or anything like that, but with the new kickoff rule, special teams is going to be that much more important. And like I said, when you're the fifth or sixth corner on the depth chart, you gotta be willing to go out there and play special teams. So, does his skill set translate into something that he would probably be pretty solid at?
So I think he did play some special team snaps at Alabama and a decent amount of special teams at Alabama. I'd have to look that up. Obviously, like I didn't watch Oregon special teams tape, so I don't have a feel for who he is as a special teamer at all. But he's a willing tackler on the defensive side of the ball, right? He's physical as a tackler. I think he loses sometimes in physicality when taking on blocks from receivers. Like he can get knocked back off the line of scrimmage pretty frequently, but he's aggressive as a tackler and physical as a tackler, like coming up in the run game and things like that. So that would generally be a good sign for a special teamer for me, right? Somebody who's a gunner who you need to go downfield and be physical and tackle a punt returner or something like that could be valuable. I don't know. The other interesting question there, obviously they're changing the kickoff rules, and a lot of the theory or a lot of people are saying they're probably going with bigger bodies in the kickoff rule. So where before you basically want to have 10 defensive backs on the field because you need fast guys to be able to get down the field to be able to make the tackle. I think you're going to see a little fewer defensive backs, so maybe it won't be as critical for a corner to be able to do that, but I can't really speak either way. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
True.
Yeah, I got a couple questions.
Oh, here we go. Be ready, Matt. This could go this could go anywhere.
No, that if you got in a cage match with Tyler Fornes, who would win? No, I got a question here. Two questions. Give me one thing that you think the Vikings are really going to thrive in. Give me one part of the team you really think they're going to be of excellence in. And then on the opposite side, kind of give me an idea right now. I know we got a long way to go, but one spot where they might have some trouble.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about what the Vikings are going to be able to do in pass rush situations on defense. I think you look at the talent that we added this offseason in terms of the pure pass rush potential, right? With Dallas Turner, obviously, but Grenard and Van Ginkel, like Danielle Hunter, amazing. I love Danielle Hunter. I would have loved to keep Danielle Hunter, but I didn't love the depth beyond that. I actually thought Marcus Davenport played okay in the 20 snaps he played last year, right? But DJ Wanham, I was never a huge fan of. I think with Brian Flores is going to be able to put those three guys on the field in third and long and just create a nightmare for the opposing offensive line, right? In terms of being able to block them. And I think on the offensive side of the ball, outside of the quarterback, which is an unknown, right? Whether it's Sam Darnold starting for half the season or whatever, or JJ McCarthy gets in right away, that's an unknown. I think the pieces around it are excellent. I don't want to say our run game is going to be awesome, but I think Aaron Jones is a huge upgrade over what we had last year from a running perspective. And obviously with Justin Jefferson healthy, hopefully, right, for the entire season, along with Jordan Addison, those passing weapons are going to put whoever we have in quarterback in the best situation possible, right? So that's one offense, one defense. Run blocking is still a question for me on the offense, and that's where I'd hold the run game on the offense back. Right. It's just, I don't know if the interior of the offensive line is going to hold up to the level that we need them to. And I think Kirk did some pretty good mitigation stuff with the offensive line that you saw a little bit of breakdown, particularly with Josh Dobbs, who wasn't willing to play on schedule all that often last year, right, for the offensive line. So that could create a struggle. And then it's hard for me, but coverage in general, right? The corner room, like we're talking about with Khyree Jackson, all these guys except for Byron Murphy to me are unknowns. Right. So we really need to shore up the corners and get two quality starters besides Byron out of that, right? Because we need to be able to play with three starters. So that secondary coverage is still a work in progress for me. And hopefully Jackson is a part of that, but we can't know that right before the season. And we can just base it on, if you just base it off of, all right, maybe our best option is a 4th round pick. That's usually not a great situation to be in. Right. So that's probably the biggest question. I gave you a little bit of bonus offense, defense, both sides of the ball there.
Excellent. And my last question is one that I forgot to ask Thor Nystrom. because we ask all of our guests this question, and it's G-rated, Ted, don't worry. You're feeling good. You're having a great day. Vikings win the Super Bowl. You're having some drinks or whatever. You're in a great mood. What is your go-to music CD that you're going to pop in? What is your favorite CD? I'm playing this, and I'm going to turn the volume up to 10. Give me your CD.
All right, so I'll give you.
Give me two. Give me two.
I'll give you two. One you're probably not going to recognize is By Inheritance by Artillery. It's a thrash metal album. They're a Danish band. Came out in '92. It's better than me. My of the big four, my favorite is Megadeth. So, and I'm a big Peace Sells, Rust in Peace guy. Like those two albums are absolutely incredible to me. But Artillery by Inheritance, I think, outpaces that. Like it's just a banger from front to back. Just hanging out. I'm a huge Black Sabbath guy. I love Ozzy Black Sabbath in particular.
The early
so like
Black
Master
Sabbath.
of Reality is great, but actually I kind of like the later Ozzy Black Sabbath. Like I love Sabotage for some reason. I think it's a great album.
I like the first one. The first one to me, the first ever Black Sabbath
album.
Yeah. That Fairies Wear Boots and all that's classic stuff, man.
Yeah, you get the Black Sabbath, right? Like that's such an awesome song, such an awesome intro to the album.
I mean, it doesn't get much better than NIB.
Yeah.
Excellent, man. Thank you. I'm going to mark that down. We got Sally Spice, everybody. You gave us their choices.
And if you can't tell, I'm a huge metalhead. I don't know if that's obvious from the hair or the t-shirts. I'm a big metalhead, right? I don't know if that's obvious from the hair or the t-shirts or the music that I'm telling you, but yeah.
Ted's a big metalhead. Ted, give me your metal band. What's your favorite metal band?
Slim Whitman.
He rocks. He played with Cannibal Corpse, Slim Whitman.
I thought that was the dude that was riding the bomb at the end of Doctor Strangelove. That was Slim Pickens.
Slim Pickens.
Thank you, Matt Freese, for that. That's great.
All right, folks. That has been Matt Freese telling us everything you ever wanted to know about fourth-round pick Khyree Jackson, but we're afraid to ask. Matt, before we let you go, let us know where we can find you on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, so you can find me. My last name is Freeze, by the way, so you got that right. But I always say @FriesFootball on Twitter, right? It kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit better for me. I write for Zone Coverage, so you can find my article on JJ McCarthy. I actually have two out. One is a full scouting report on those games, and then the charting information, which just came out today on Wednesday. But I've got an article every week, and I try to go pretty long form in that, give a lot of in-depth in a topic. You can find me and Nick Olson, my co-host, at Kindred Skulls. Our friend Greg Blake also is a co-host on that podcast. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
How many teachers called you fries in high school?
So many. It's a struggle to get people to pronounce it correctly. Like I've just given up. So like when I'm on the phone, you have to say your last name or whatever, I just say fries. It's okay.
Oh, just easier that way, huh?
Well, he's Matt Freeze. Don't call him Fries.
Yeah,
you can find him all over the net. He's a great writer. He's a great podcaster. He's a great blogger, and we like to call him a friend. Matt, thanks so much for joining us, and we will hope to have you on at some point later on during the season as we check up on the Vikings and this new look team as we move forward into this new era of McCarthy and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a ton of fun. Thanks, guys.
All right, that'll about do it for episode 134. Thanks again to Matt Freeze for joining us and giving us all the scoops, if you will, on Khyree Jackson. We'll be back next week with episode 135. We'll break down whoever the next Vikings draft pick is. I didn't bother to look it up. I'm still in kind of semi-vacation mode, but I will be on top of it next week, which is what she said.
Ding, 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 ding.
Folks, thanks so much for watching the show, for joining us this evening, for liking, subscribing, commenting, doing all that you do for supporting us. We got more prizes coming into the prize vault. Drew and Ruby do a great job of updating that and keeping it funky, fly, and fresh, if you will, as the kids say. I don't even know what the kids say anymore. Chris, take us home. Drew, say goodnight, whatever it is we do. I don't know.
We've managed to get another one in the books with a minimum of issues, I think, other than our own personal issues, which we're never actually going to overcome. We're just hosed on that front. But always fun. Matt was a great interview. Really informative stuff about Khyree Jackson And yeah, make sure to check out his other work as well. But yeah, I don't know if next week is the kicker breakdown. It might be because I think Will Reichard might have been the next pick without.
Is he next
without
on the
looking it up.
list?
It's either him or Walter Rouse.
We're
One
gonna
of
have
those
to
two
find
guys.
Fod Reves and have him on to break that down.
DIY Network legend Fuad Reves. That would be sweet. Honest to God, he had his own show on the DIY channel for several years.
Did he really?
He absolutely did. I will find it and send you a link to it. I don't think it's on anymore, but he did for several years.
He's got to be in the top 3 kickers of all time for the Vikings, right, Fod?
He's got to be up there. I mean, it's a really short list, but yeah.
It's Walter Rouse.
So Walter Rouse is next. Okay.
Great interview tonight, Ted. You find some great guests for this show. We had a great time with Matt Freeze. Don't call me Fries. Metalhead Matt. We found out about that. His taste in music.
Absolutely.
He likes that metal. I like that metal. You like that metal. We covered that. Ted slayed the Muskies. I don't think we left anything out. And Keel Harry's going to play some tight end. We got it all covered for Toonces. Everybody involved, thanks, Toonces, for taking care of the show. That's it for 134. We'll see you next week. Say goodnight, Chris.
Good night, Chris.
Say goodnight, Ted.
Good night, Ted. Frizer.
I really thought you were going to go with Muskie there, but apparently.